It's February 5, 1988, and we are in the living room of Sig and Elsa Sander,
3:40 p.m.
3:40 p.m. on Siesta Key in Florida. And we are about to talk among ourselves about their activities in Springfield, starting particularly with the Town and Country program that Elsa has been
mental retardation.
The mental
retardation. Mental retardation.
The Town and Country mental retardation, in which Elsa has been so active, and you have too, have you not? See?
More or less, but not as active as she.
Okay. Well, Elsa will tell us as far back as she can remember, and move forward from there. Let's see, Elsa.
Well, what I know first is just from hearsay, because we went in Springfield when the whole thing was started. It was started by Dr. Fred Miller, who was a minister at one of the Lutheran churches in town, and he had a retarded son. There was no program at all, and he got some of the parents of retarded children together and started this school, which he called school, and some of the mothers would teach the children a room at the Y, and it later developed when there were more people interested in sending their children to school, which of course they hadn't before. There was no special education in regular schools. And later on, must have been the early 30s, one of the women in town gave their house after they moved out to the program, the mental retardation, and they started that as the first regular school. And I don't know exactly how big it was when they started it. And
in the year 1950s or 50 children?
No,
1950s?
it might have been in the 40s. I don't think.
Well, we can find that out.
We came here in 38, but that can be
can-
established later
We can
on.
get that material when we're back
Because
in
there are
Springfield.
still people living in town whose children were then there and even taught. And they were there for several years, and then I think at that time, during those years, they put a levy on the ballot and got money from the state and from the Clark County to start the school, and it was built on Van Buren Avenue as a school for the retarded and supported by part of the taxes from the Clark County population. And Dr. Miller went really wholeheartedly after every means, every money that would be available. And later on, they had different classes, of course, and they tried to educate these young people to a level that they could reach, which in some cases was very low, in some cases was higher. And then later on, they started like an industrial class after they graduated, whatever they call graduation, and then taught them some kind of work with their hands. And even there too, they worked on the possibility of each child, whatever they could do. Well, it developed even further, and later on, when I was on the board, they had outgrown the school and this training center which they had, and bought an old garage on Thompson Avenue, which was right behind the Holiday Inn on North Street, I think it is. And they hired people there, and it really grew quite a bit. And they went into town to the big industries and asked them to give them work that these young people could do, and they would treat them as, well, they called them clients, but they were employees, And they did the work that they could do, and I think Springfield Industry has been very kind to them. And they work for the Harvester now, Navista, and for other big industry, and for Kissel Company. They sent out envelopes, stuffed envelopes, things like that they could do. And they also worked for some people in Yellow Springs. And so these young people could make a salary. Of course, they didn't have to go by the wage scale that was the law. They had special permission to pay them less since their work didn't come out as productive. They were not as productive as the normal people. Then the need was urgent for having a residential center for young people, middle age also, whose parents weren't able to take care of their children, keep them at home, or people's parents died later on, and these young people were getting older and they had no place to go. And there again, money was obtained for building this residential center, and they had room for approximately, I would say at that time, between 80 and 100 people,
In the center as residents.
Mm-hmm.
It's big.
And maybe it was a little less, but they started this, and it's a beautiful modern building, and we hired a director there and a social worker who was working with these people and with the parents. They had an admission committee. We met regularly, and everybody was screened and see whether they were eligible to be admitted there. Of course, if they were very severely retarded and need one-to-one care, we weren't equipped to take care of those. And then there was state institutions available that would take care of the very severely handicapped. But we did have people that were non-ambulatory afterwards. And we even had once a baby that was taken in. And but they didn't take it in since we were only equipped at that time to take 6 years and up. But this was a baby who really needed care right away. And they had a meeting with the employees, and they voted they wanted to take care of the baby, and they had it. Unfortunately, it was a little boy who died a few months after, at a very young age. I don't think he got more than about maybe a year and a half old. But that was probably the youngest they had. And then they had older people too, and they would live there and either attend the school or attend the workshop. And we had bought buses. There were buses available who transport the children. Later on, if some of the people who worked in industry in town could be taught to use the buses. And so little by little, they tried to really get those people to a level where they could help themselves, and started afterwards to build little individual homes where some of the kids could live together with like house mother or house parents. And we hired couples where the man might have been working and the woman would stay and take care and help those people, and who were taught little household chores, help in the kitchen and help to make their beds. And we're pretty much living like in a home environment. And even after that, and they found that there were people who could even take care of themselves by themselves. They hired small apartments, and there were maybe 2 young boys or young men who worked in the city and who were able to take care of themselves, like keeping the house clean and doing the cooking and doing the shopping, would live there under maybe weekly supervision and connection in case they needed help right away to call for help if they needed it. But it all worked out, and there was never any problem. Like at first, when they had the first house where the people lived, the neighbors were very anxious to have them there. But the director we had at that time would have a meeting and would have open house and invited the neighbors and said, look, this is what we're doing. And they became very helpful and neighborly to those people. I mean, when people don't know what's all about, they're afraid, which is a natural reaction. And you probably have read in the paper where people were fighting, having retarded homes in a neighborhood where they live, the kids live, and they were afraid they might do something. Well, never has anything happened in this group. And so I have no record on how many people they take care of now. But the school is running. We have a school. There's a principal in the school. We have the residential center. We have a wonderful sport program. They have a big, they have swimming pool there. They take the kids bowling. They take part in the Junior Olympics. And they go all over the state, and even I think some they go farther out. People come here to look at the home because it's supposed to be. I would say, I'm very proud of it, I think it's the finest in Ohio by all means. And I think it is one of the finest in the United States.
Certainly a handsome physical layout. I've seen it.
It's a wonderful layout.
Would you continue then and tell us about the development of the large building on the Leffels Lane that you bought?
That was then in addition to the workshop that they had on Thompson Avenue. They had outgrown that, and they got a lot of work and a lot of help. And later on, they got a lot of work from the Air Force, from Wright State, and this was something that had never been done before, to repair cargo nets for transport for the airplanes. And through one of the men who worked, became a member of the board, and he made it possible that they signed a contract with the Town and Country Workshop, TC, I think they call it. And by that time, this place was too small. So there was this big, it was a discount store, Groveman on Leffel Lane, available. They went out of business, and that building was for sale. So after long hesitation, after long research, was the money available, and it needed a lot of repair. And I think we got help from the state at the time. I'm not quite sure how it was handled. But it was rebuilt, it was redecorated, and it is now, I think, in full operation.
You were saying how much physical repair it took, such a new roof, for instance. That's a big building.
They had to put a new roof on it, and
who were the people who helped
divide the walls, and they had to make. They have their own dining area. You know, they bring their own lunches to school.
People brown bag their lunch.
Brown bag, and you know, there are little things that always amazed me how they tried to fill the needs. Now they couldn't read, and you numbered their little boxes where they keep their belongings, you know, and they didn't know the numbers. So each one had to bring a photograph and put it on the door so they knew exactly whose was whose, you know.
I'm sure there are a lot of makeshift things like that which are
It is
developed
amazing
as you
how
go.
inventive those workers there. And then later on, they were very strict, and they were checked by a national board, I think once a year, and updated that everything was up to par. Mm-hmm. They had to keep record for every client that worked there. Mm-hmm. And each person who worked there had to have a certain training. And a lot of those people that worked there as helpers or supervisors had to go back to school and take certain courses that were required to
This
work.
is a national certification of your
Yes.
staff, is it? More than a state
Staff
certificate.
and papers and records.
Do you get national help then from the
I think there is,
Federal
I
government?
don't know the percentage of national
state funds?
or state fund. I think it's mostly state fund we get.
I wonder how they have fared in recent cutbacks in this administration.
I'm not informed what happened lately,
We'll
but
put that
I'm
on
sure that
another list.
they might have to fought
And that-
for
well,
it, yeah.
you were telling me about the way mechanical chores were managed, such as putting stamps on envelopes and that kind of, the cargo net repair, for instance. Could you go into that a little more?
I wasn't working there. I worked as a volunteer for several years, but the cargo net came after I had stopped working there. But they had the running band with the envelopes, and they're stuffed envelopes, and they were sitting there, and each one put one sheet together, and then at the end somebody put them all in the envelope, and then they were closed. Somebody
licked them or
not
wet
they
them?
licked them.
I didn't lick 'em.
They had a sponge, and somebody else would put the stamps on it. And the stamps usually were put on either by a supervisor or somebody who was capable of doing it.
Putting them on straight.
Yes.
And each and every
And
one.
of course, I always thought, well, I could teach them something. And we collected Christmas cards and made new cards. I had seen somebody doing that. As a matter of fact, in Florida, one of the retarded homes made it. And you would cut out the pictures and then put them on a sheet, on a little card, and put a stamp on back, recycled by the retardation, and then we would sell them. We had little
fundraiser here.
Yes, little fundraisers, and they had one year they had a card party. The mothers club had a card party. Then they would have had a table, and we had some of these things that they made, but they didn't have the attention span to do things for too long. Sometimes they would cut it out, and then after a while.
Also, I'm gathering that.
Shells.
Pardon?
Yeah, I tried
Shell?
that too. I tried to teach them to make shell pictures. When we went
When you were
with the
here?
bag, I had a whole bag, and then the supervisors there and the people cut out those little pressed wood pieces.
Yes.
And I tried to take some glue and make little figures and little flowers out of shells, and they pasted it on. But even then, after
little
a
too
while,
tough?
they lost interest. And there were some they could learn crochet or knit. Some of the girls could do that. There was even one girl who was very handy with the sewing machine.
Good.
And they made pot holders and things.
Yes.
And I think Smiling Bob gave pot holders away, W.I.Z., and they were made by the people there.
I gather that there is a mixture of volunteer parents, perhaps, and staff.
There were
all of them.
some, not too many volunteers.
I take it the volunteers were not too encouraged.
Yes, I think if they wanted to, they could work. At first, now I worked and I had absolutely no training. I just went there and I said, well, tell me what I can do. And I would keep record sheets. I helped more the instructors than I helped the others. But then sometimes they would do certain work and they said, now you watch and see that they do it right. But later on, it had to be a trained person who did that.
Was that by state requirement?
I think by requirement. So they said, well, we can't let you do this or that. This has to be done by somebody who has certification for that,
You were saying the other day that that students clients were paid a percentage of the minimum wage.
The minimum wage was not needed to be watched in this way because they cannot come up to produce like a normal person. Some are very, very slow, maybe only 50%, maybe only 20, maybe only 10% what a normal person can do. But they did get paid.
According to that percentage of output?
Of what they could. And what do you want to say?
The minimum wage applies. However, each person has a certain amount of productivity that he can fulfill. So that minimum wage is multiplied by the percentage of productivity, and that's going to be the basis upon which he's being paid.
When a person perhaps might be 50% of what was considered normal, and that's a youngster, or a person who can function in the outside world, and let's assume that that person has a roommate and that two young people have an apartment together, or three or four. If there is not enough money made by pooling their income, are there other subsidies or assistances that will help them
Now, might be,
survive?
I'm not aware of it.
Uh-huh.
But most of the people are not 50%
Even less than that?
capable. Some of them only 20%, some only 5 or 10%.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think the people
It's all
that,
state controlled. There's an inspector coming in and sees exactly what the percentage is. That was applied when the cargo nets were made.
Uh-huh. Federal job.
There were some people there who could handle the sewing machines very well.
Mhm.
And the sewing machines only sew in squares.
Yes.
And they knew exactly what to do. And they were paid accordingly.
That would probably be a high
They
pay
were the high
item.
paid ones.
Uh-huh. I'm concerned about the retarded person whose parents are aging. Does the school have a in loco parentis program? Do they take over the management or the responsibility for a 40 or 50-year-old person whose parents have died? And let's assume that there are no more.
if they don't have any guardians
Mhm.
appointed by the parents, or maybe people that do have means and that leave money in trust for this son or daughter,
Mhm.
then I think they can either they can appoint somebody through the court of doing that if it's necessary. But I think that the social worker and the people that work in the home would be able to handle that,
It doesn't get into the courts or into the law system.
unless something happened that somebody
Oh.
would claim something's done wrong.
Well, the
So I'm sure
residential
that
center was planned for these people. When the parents are dying and they're
they take over.
older
Yeah.
and cannot take care of it, then they will be transferred to the residential center and live there.
Or, as Ilsa was saying, live independently in supervised homes. I think that's great.
Well, those are group homes.
Group homes.
They're group homes, and then there are some that are advanced enough that can live by themselves. But they are also under supervision.
There are about 7 or 8 group homes in Springfield, with 8 or 9 people living in one house parent, 2 house
As a
parents.
matter of fact, Dr. Miller used to live on North Fountain Avenue,
Mhm.
and when he had to go into a nursing home, he left his house to the program. He has the son still living in the residential center. I don't think the son is capable of living in a group home yet. Oh, he probably won't ever. He's a man in his 40s now. But their home on North Fountain Avenue, it's a lovely house, and they had to rebuild certain rooms and certain equipment in the house for a group home. And I think they have now 4 or 6 young people living there.
4 or 6, and then you'll have a
The house parent.
staff person.
Yeah.
Are there changes in the home itself in terms of simplicity of stoves or refrigerators, or do they use those fairly standard fashion?
Yes, that would. I don't see why not.
How about telephoning? Can most people use the telephone?
Some can be taught. Oh yes. Right, just the same. They teach them how to use a bus when
Yes.
they go to work.
Yeah.
They won't. I don't think they would teach them to drive a car. I think it might not be. They have
Complex.
to be really almost normal in order to do that. But they do use public transportation. They are taught to.
What happens when you have an admission of a person who may have some kind of mental problem, such as childhood schizophrenia. I mean, some milder disease than
Well,
that.
it's a very fine line between mental illness and mental retardation, as you probably know. And there were a lot of borderlines where it was very difficult to say, now, is this person mentally retarded or is it just a mental illness? Probably could be treated by a psychiatrist or something. And it's a very fine line they have to draw sometimes.
You must have a high ratio of staff people to clients.
To what?
You must have a high ratio of staff people to handle all these young people, young and old and middle-aged people with their
Yes,
attendant
they are.
training
They
needs.
have, of course, 24 hours duties there. They have to have somebody there day and night, and they have a head nurse, and they have, I think, they have 2 nurses, and the one who's in charge of it, and another one, and they have their medication that has to be given out, and that has to be supervised by the supervisor in the workshop also, because some of those people have to take medication during the day.
Yes.
You know, there are some that are epileptic and spastic, and they have to have their medication taken.
But they also had the state, what's it called, the Orient in
Oh, that's the
Columbus.
state.
Oh,
I
yes.
think they're closed
State
in the
institute.
They're
meantime.
closed in
Orient.
the meantime, and that's where they sent the people that were incorrigible. But now they're changed again, and a lot of people were sent back into
Well, the state,
local
and I
program.
think that's the tendency all over the United States now, that they would like to empty the state institutions and have all those people sent back to where they came from, to the county that they came from. And we got some of them there, but you have to be careful of whether some are not, they're too difficult to handle and could hurt some of the other people.
Difficult and
So
or
it's-
destructive.
Yeah. So that's, and I tell you, when you see some of those people in the state institution, you just won't believe there's anything like that possible.
Now,
Men
what
and
happened
women.
to the
Springview?
Springview? There's still a state organization.
Yeah, they have people in there
They are,
that are retarded. That is handled by the state. And you remember the TB sanatorium?
Yes.
That is taken over and now is made a, well, the one program works with the other, and some go to school if they can, but they are very severely handicapped,
More handicapped than your children.
mentally and physically also.
Is there a school on the grounds in either of these institutions? Do you have a school at your institution?
At the residential center?
Yeah.
No, they're going to town country school.
I see.
They're taking over there by bus,
By bus.
school bus. We have a regular school bus, and the school bus also picks up children from their homes and takes them to school and takes them back. See, there are a lot of people that have their children at home, and if they don't have the transportation, like the parents work or something,
Yeah.
the bus comes, picks them up, and takes them home.
This is a huge organization. I wonder what
It
your...
is anymore.
Oh.
It started out very
you
small.
remember Ruth 3D used to work in our office? She was a teacher, and she became a teacher out of the retarded
She
school.
had to take special education courses.
And she was
And
there
the
for several
teachers
years.
are so devoted, it is unbelievable. They have to be. If you handle those children, you have to have an awful lot of patience. And some are so poorly equipped with what human beings do. They have to be diapered. They have to be changed.
You can
in
take them in
school.
your school?
Yes, they take them. There are some there. And then we have a preschool group now, later on, that was started, where the parents can bring their little ones and have them trained from the beginning. I don't know how old they have to be, maybe a year or 2 years, and can bring them there, and they show the mothers how they can work with the children, of doing certain things in order to educate them at a very early age, because you can influence them to a certain extent when they're that young.
This is impressive.
It is starting now very, very early, and they're trying to help them.
To go out to the workshop on Leffel Lane and see the head man there. His name is Hope, isn't it? William
I'll
Hope.
go out with you sometime.
Good idea.
I'd love to. And I introduce you, and there's still some
You won't be
people that
surprised
work.
how efficient some of these people are working. They're trained to do one job, and only this one job and nothing else, all day long. But they do it and do it well. The amount of nets that are being have been repaired goes into thousands and thousands of them. This outfit saved the United States government a lot of money. And
Of course. I was
here
told
before they were thrown away.
a cargo net's a big sturdy piece of equipment.
Well, we bought at that time about 3 or 4 special sewing machines for this particular purpose. And Springfield Industry gave us the money for it.
Good for them. We never do
At,
fundraising?
At voting time that people might not support the levy.
So you've never had a levy defeated
No,
in all of your time,
no, we've been very fortunate.
and you get state money, and you get federal money?
I'm not sure what the percentage is, whether we get federal money. That is something I had nothing to do with it now.
Well, I know
I
that
should
you.
have known because
Well,
science
it's been a while.
things.
I know that you were chairman of the board from several years at least. How large a board is that, Elsa?
I think we had about 9
The functioning
or
people,
11 people.
an active board,
Very active.
uh-huh. And everyone had their own area of
Later on,
expertise.
we did. Just each one would work with one phase of the program more than the other, and then when we had our meeting, we would report on this special phase of it.
What was a qualification for a board member?
You just had to show an interest in the
Show an
program.
interest. I'm sure that many of them were parents of retarded children.
There had to be a certain percentage of the board members should have been a parent and then an outsider. They wanted both represented on the board.
And you represented the outsider, of course.
Yes, I was an outsider and a layman.
Oh,
I
and-
knew nothing about the program when I got in.
Were there professionals on the board?
We had a lawyer on it,
No.
and we had an insurance man, we had a banker on it for a while.
But
and
no
we
one.
had a businessman on it, and we had some of the parents on it, and we had usually the Mothers Club president was invited to attend. And we always had a report from the nurse at the residential. No, that was on the admission committee. We had the nurse always there, and the social worker on the admission to the residential center. And sometimes they would bring in the person that was applying, or where the parents were applying, that we could see who it was.
Who you're admitting, and
Yeah.
what the youngster looked like.
It wasn't always a youngster.
Well, now you're getting, through your years of experience, to geriatric problems. Some of them are getting older, right?
Well, I tell you, what we also did, there were surprisingly many retarded people in local nursing homes.
Just because there was no place else for them.
There was no place to go, and they lived at home all their lives until the parents maybe died, and this person was maybe in his 30, 40, 50. They didn't know what to do. They put them in a nursing home.
Very expensive and not very satisfactory.
Well, some of them were in Social Security, and some of them were homes that you wouldn't send your dog to, between you and me. And then finally, we started a program. I say we. I said this program started a. But they always laugh when they mention it and say, Mr. Sanders says this is a babysitting program,
All
which
right.
it was.
Yeah, sure.
They would pick up those people in the different nursing homes and bring them there and entertain them and play games with them. For those people, it meant an awful lot to get away from sitting in a nursing home
Oh, sure.
and watching television and waiting for the meal to be served and waiting to go to bed.
Oh dear.
That's all they did in those homes. And these people were retarded. They couldn't read, probably. And they didn't know anything else to do. They had no other interest. They had no more family who would look after them. They were forgotten. But they would pick them up and take them down there maybe twice a week. And they would play little games or tell them stories or do anything like that. It was a babysitting
All right.
service.
All
But
right.
at least they got out.
That's important.
And they liked it, and they knew each other, and they were real cute and funny people there, you know. And I would sit there sometimes and talk to them, you know. And they were funny.
Did they ever dance or
They
sing?
have dances. The young people have dances where not only the people that live in the residential, but the people that live with their parents. And they had always, on a holiday, they had a costume party on Halloween, and they had a Christmas party, and they had picnics, and they had a fair at their open house where they invited everybody to come, and they were serving punch and cookies and all that. And then they have, I think they had every Wednesday night, maybe from 7 to 9, they had music, and they would dance. And then they had boyfriends and girlfriends, and then they fought sometimes, just like any other
Like
teenagers,
people.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very funny. And then some of them loved ball games, like Dr. Miller's boy. And he was very friendly with the firemen at one fire station. And he would like to visit them. And they were very nice to him. And then the whole group of them would always go to ball games. They would go to Wittenberg games. They would go to other games, you know, just as an adult. And they liked that.
Well, of course.
And they probably would have movies they showed there. And they had sometimes performers that would, I think from the Art Council, mime that were in town. And they would ask, would you give a show here? And they would give a show at the residential. And they have a beautiful big hall with a stage. And they would come there and do that. And they had their own basketball game. And they would play each other institutionalized. They came, probably the retardation place from Dayton would play the one here in Springfield. And they would go by bus and have a meet.
They have a regular basketball court.
They have a basket, yeah.
In the school.
And they would have their own games, and they had the Special Olympics that some of them would participate, and some were excellent swimmers, and they would have bowling contests.
Oh my
with other
goodness.
groups together. They're good bowlers, and I think some of the bowling alleys would let them come once a week.
We
And
even
bowl
attended the national conference in California at one time.
Well,
Really?
they
Springfield
had
did?
We did.
yeah, we went.
Elsa and I went out there.
Two other couples. Dr. Miller and his
Dr.
wife
Miller.
were out there. It was interesting
Rather
to
interesting.
see.
I
And
would
how
think so.
they fought for certain things that
And
they
you should
wanted
see
from
the
the government.
dinner dinners were served. There were on the dais were some people that were retarded people. They acted beautifully.
There was one man who was on the national board of the retardation. And he was not retarded, but he was a very severely handicapped man. He was born without arms, and he was only this little. And if something came up, he would go to the microphone and voice his opinion, what should be done and what should be changed. The government should ask to do this and this. It was amazing. And he was sitting at the front table, and of course he was very, not self-conscious at all. He'd eat right with his face in his plate.
Oh, bless his heart.
And he was amazing. And he was a nice man. They all knew him because he's been in the
For a long
bar for so
time.
many years.
Yeah.
He's
But there was-
handicapped.
Indeed
But
he was.
he worked for this, for the program.
Isn't that
And then at that
impressive?
time they had a big exhibit, and you'd be surprised how many places there are in this country that do special things for handicapped people.
That's
They
a-
had for the blind, where you couldn't see colors. They couldn't see colors, of course, and they had lipstick, and each was a different color, and each one had a different smell. So they knew exactly what color it was by the smell.
The foster kid.
Hmm?
Foster.
The foster child?
What do you mean? Well, there are a lot of local. You mean local people?
The cellist for the symphony.
Oh, yes.
Her
Yeah,
son,
Eleanor
Eleanor's
Foster.
Eleanor Foster's son is working down at the transportation
I
program.
didn't know that.
Yeah, he's retired.
He's a Mongoloid.
Mongoloid.
Nice boy.
Mhm.
And you know who used to go down there? She's now grown up. Is Andy Hamill's daughter.
Yes. Uh-huh. Forget what her name is.
She's
Well, anyway, she did get a good deal of schooling there.
and her mother just worked with that child.
I know she
And
did.
you could see it.
Mhm.
See? That she's always well dressed and
Yeah, very presentable.
yes.
Mhm.
And of course in winter they'd go to Florida, but then in summer she'd come back and she'd be at the workshop.
Did she participate in the workshop with other youngsters?
I don't know whether she did much,
Uh-huh.
but she was there.
She was there,
and
part of
she
it.
did
Mhm.
certain things.
Mhm. I think this is a program you can be very, very proud of.
Yeah, I think Springfield can be proud of it.
Mhm.
And I wish more people would know it. And of course we had open house there when the building was built. A lot of people came to see it. But I always
People
feel
from the
not
federal
enough.
government in Washington came. The head of the health
Yeah,
and
we had a
welfare,
speaker from Washington when we dedicated
opening
the building.
speech. It's quite an affair.
I'm glad you get national recognition for this, too. That's really
Oh,
impressive.
yes, they have to. And anybody is very impressed when they see it.
Mhm.
Because it is something very, very special.
Well, I'm going to take you up on your offer to visit the place.
Yeah,
Because I've really
I'd
not
like to
been
take
in it
you.
for a long, long
I took a
time.
lot of our friends, when they had
Oh.
open house, I would say, oh, you have to see it, come on,
Sure.
we'll go on.
Sure.
At one time, they had a program they get, which was started by the preacher at the Oakland Presbyterian Church to take care of the babies that were retarded. And that was done, no, forget about it. It was done in the basement of the
They
center.
still have it at the Grace Lutheran
They
Church,
have it now.
which is something where people come up with certain methods. It's
Oh, a matter
method
of
treatment
physical training, was it? Mhm. Patterning,
pattern.
you know.
And it is not recognized by
That's
So
true.
I don't want to get into
Yeah.
that because I don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
And there were lots of disputing about it.
Oh, I
don't
think so. I think it's a questionable.
And they wanted part of what is used for this program, for that program,
Mm-hmm.
and there were a lot of things that were difficult.
Tape recorder, I didn't catch this fast enough to turn you off, but the matter of the Grace Lutheran Church patterning program should be not included in this tape recording. Thank you. Anything else you'd like to add before we terminate this?
Not right now, but there are people that probably have very pertinent answers
Oh,
to
yes.
pertinent questions that you could get from them,
Mhm.
like datas and numbers of residents. I am not sure I can get it for you, and if you go out with me to talk to Mr. Holt, he knows how many people work
Mhm.
there, what they're doing now, and You probably have a few questions as a layman that I can't answer you because
I think
I'm
one
not
item
that
you should
familiar.
add to it, I think, the Alma Weisselbaum should get recognition for having given this building to the school, which started the first beginning of a school for the retarded called the Country Day School, wasn't it?
Town and Country Day School
Town
it
and
was
Country
then.
Day School.
Would you say her name slowly and clearly?
Alma
Alma
Weisselbaum.
Weisselbaum, Weixelbaum.
And it's Elma or Alma?
Alma,
Alma. A-L-M-A. Okay.
used to be an old maiden lady who lived in the family residence on Yellow Spring Street all her life till she finally moved to Fountain Avenue and gave this house to the retardation program as a first school. She was very much interested in that. I think the retardation program is still receiving some money from her trust fund annually.
That was a wonderful gift to start
Yeah.
the program off with.
She started the program from school.
Can you guess about what year that might have been?
Must have been
Early 40s, I would say.
No, it was later than that. 40? No, that's a Klima. Died in 54.
What?
Mark it 40, 45.
1940 or 45, somewhere in there. We can pick this up. Then you were telling us of the attorney and his mother. What are their names who were involved in this for many years?
Wheeler, Richard Wheeler is the attorney, and his brother has been with the school since the beginning. And his mother used to teach at the school.
What is her name?
Oh, I forgot her first name.
Spelled W-E-H-L-E-R.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot her. She's a lovely lady.
But she's living, and she and
She
he.
and the retarded son live together in
I
Springfield.
see.
And the boy is working at the Springview
Oh, I see.
Institute.
Mhm. And he gets there by bus, does he?
I don't know how he gets there, whether she used to take him. I have no idea how he gets there.
It seems like quite a ways out to
Mhm.
go by public transport.
It isn't, she doesn't live that far. She lives on East High Street, so it isn't that far from where she lives.
Well, she was an early teacher in the school, a concerned parent, and she was there for many years, was she?
Yeah.
Is she still there?
She was very helpful to the program in the beginning. No, I don't think she teaches.
Very good. If there's anything else you want to add, we still have a lot of space on the tape, and we'll just leave it.
What about the background some of the Jewish community?
Well, that's for another tape. That's a
This one with the Elderly United.
yes, that's a separate tape. I want to do these.
No, I hadn't.